Who is the biggest troll in history? I forget the name, but that one guy from the 1800s who bought specific tickets to a play and then gave them away to bald men on the street so that when everyone took their seats and the bald men's heads reflected the light from the stage, they spelled out "fuck" a scene from the stage. This Chinese general whose city was besieged by a much larger army. So he opened the main gate and sat atop it playing his flute. The enemy thought it was a trap, so they packed their stuff and left. Zhu Liang. Magnificent bastard was so feared as a strategist and tactician. He was allegedly carried onto the battlefield posthumously. And the opposing army, despite knowing he was already dead, decided they couldn't take the chance he had some sneaky shit in the works for them. Edit. First gold? Thank you. Kind stranger. This is a good week for me. Eric the Red. He wanted people to come and live in his newfound ice-covered land, so he named it Greenland. There was a Prussian, I can't remember his name, who managed to make officers a uniform out of scraps of clothing. He used it to convince a few guards on patrol to follow him into a government building. Ordered the arrest of the man in charge. Confiscated all the money personally. Sent the arrested man to Berlin, claiming it was all on order of the king. He then ditched the uniformed. Got on a train to Berlin and managed to beat the guards there. He then sat back and watched the absolute confusion happen. The guy was eventually arrested, but the public turned him into a celebrity and his actions into a play that was performed all over Germany. He wasn't incarcerated for long, and after his release he lived an easy life from there on. Mozart didn't like this singer so much that he wrote a piece for her with high and low notes constantly, because he noticed that when she hit low notes her chin went to her chest, and when she hit high notes her head would fling back. So it was like she was bobbing like a chicken. The guy who opened a fake #1 restaurant in London using Google reviews and his back garden and shed with microwave meals. That was incredible. He also faked his way into Paris fashion show as a designer with knockoff clothes. Then whenever people around the world want to interview him about these things, he sends lookalikes instead. It must be quite exhausting knowing him. Orson Welles did a radio play that told people the Martians were invading. The next day he told everyone that his play had freaked out millions of people, when it was a few dozen at most. Stephen Hawking was in an interview when a cord was unplugged. An alarm went off. This was before he was completely immobile. And he slumped in his chair. The people interviewing him were scared out of their minds. Until they realized that he was alright. And chuckling at his joke. The cord and alarm were for a computer. When Hawking made his guest appearance on Star Trek, he got a personal tour of the set by the show's top producer. When they got to the engineering room with the warp core, Hawking said, "I'm working on that." Another frequent prank he pulled, whenever he gave a lecture, he would always take time for Q&A afterwards, always limited because of the nature of how he spoke. The format was, a person would ask the question, and they would wait 15 minutes for him to compose his answer, then regroup so they could listen to his response. At least once per lecture. He would wait those 15 minutes, and his answer would be only, "Yes." Double quote. Michelangelo, without a doubt. This man was hired to paint a chapel and put more dicks and asses on it than you ever did see. Not only that, but in the creation of Adam, the section that God and the angels are sitting in looks an awful lot like the cross-section of the human brain. Dissections of humans were forbidden at the time, but still took place, and it's likely that Michelangelo was present at one and saw a halved brain. Didn't George R.R. Martin once say that in the future he would love to get people so immersed in a fantasy world novel and never finish it? This would have happened with Robert Jordan's Wheel of Time series. He died partly through writing the 13th and final book in the series. But Brandon Sanderson finished it using his notes and concluded the series. I'm pretty sure most fans received it pretty well. The old Timmy Nick newspaper The Sun Imo. In the 19th century, they published some articles about the presence of life on the moon, like unicorns, winged humans, and other creatures who built temples and lived peacefully. This caused a massive moon craze until it was later outed as fake. Technically this isn't a troll since it was serving a purpose. But Admiral Nelson was escaping a French fleet when a man fell overboard. It was Nelson's policy of never leaving anyone behind, so he turned his ship around to go pick him up. The French saw his ship turn back to them. Assumed he had reinforcements coming beyond the horizon. So they turned and ran. In the 30s 40s BBC did an April Fool's broadcast where they told people how spaghetti was made. On trees. They literally showed fake spaghetti trees, and since not many people in that time knew how spaghetti was made, lots of people believed it. Theodore Roosevelt. He got shot. Went on a 1-hour speech mocking his assassin and then went to hospital. Friends. I shall ask you to be as quiet as possible. I don't know whether you fully understand that I have just been shot, sir, but it takes more than that to kill a bull moose. Double quote. Gillis Corey. A farmer caught up in the Salem witch trials. He was sentenced to pressing, being slowly crushed by stones, to force him to make a plea. Every time he was questioned, he simply said more weight. He died without making a plea. The prophet Elijah heckled the priests of Baal because their God would not set fire to their sacrifice. Ike. The Bible says the priests of Baal prayed all day while Elijah heckled them. Whoever was responsible for the last season of GOT. D&D. Don't protect those bastards, haha. I watch scenes from the old seasons on YouTube and just reflect on how f***ing good it was. D&D were like they want pew bang brrrrrrshaa death I done want it when what I find myself coming back to is conversations between characters with building tension. This will be buried. But Sergei Korolev. The dude was getting frustrated with the Soviet government because they weren't interested in funding his space exploration projects. So he got his propaganda group to publish articles about how Russia was getting close to sending something into space. As expected, the US took the bait and started working on their satellite program. And the Soviet government freaked out when they saw the US doing that. So they funded Korolev's projects. He and his group played them good. Russians. And how they continuously retreated when Napoleon tried to attack them, resulting in him giving up due to the situations his army was facing. Like disease. There is a fountain in Koblenz, Germany, built by a French general in honor of the successful campaign against the Russians, written on the fountain in French. When the Russians defeated Napoleon and came to Koblenz, they saw the fountain. Instead of tearing it down, the Russians added to the text in French. Seen and approved by us. Russian commander of the city of Koblenz. Leonardo da Vinci. He made almost no actual contributions to science. Everything he discovered and documented in his journals could not be read as they were encoded and mirrored. Much of what he discovered had been rediscovered by the time the books were decoded. Pope John XXIII. He was pope during his teenage and late 20s, so naturally we all know that he was kind of an ass. But he was not only an ass, but literally the biggest ass of not giving a fuck. He would do wine and sexual debauchery. And literally did not give a FCK about anything that went happened. He was the ruler of papal states until he died. But yeah, John XXIII was not a good pope. If anything, he was the worst pope in the century, but he was literally the physical embodiment of rich and powerful connections. Steve Wilhite. He invented the GIF. Then he won a Webby Award for it. Webby Award speeches are only allowed to be 5 words long. He went up and said it's pronounced GIF, not GIF. Double quote. Jod himself could come down and tell me that. I wouldn't believe it. It's GIF. Forever. Bye. This will prob get buried, but here goes. Whoever came up with the American Armed Forces plan during the Cold War to drop boxes of extra large condoms labeled as medium on the Soviet troops. The result was the Soviets thought the Americans were packing. Greatest military troll of all time. Herostratus. He burned the temple of Artemis around 400 BC. Just for the lulz and the notoriety apparently. They killed him for it. Painfully. And enacted a law forbidding his name from ever being mentioned. Yet here we are more than 2000 years later. And Herostratus and his stunt is not forgotten. Don't know if this has been said. But Stalin. He convicted his closest friends of treason, then had them sentenced to death. Later on, they were blindfolded and awaiting the firing squad's bullets. The squad fired blanks. Stalin pulled the blindfolds off and said, "Gotcha." Legend. Andy Kaufman deserves a nod for sure. If you've never seen the videos of him becoming a semi-pro wrestler just so he can taunt Southerners, go look that shit up. The employee at the Four Seasons landscape that took the reservation for the Trump campaign without asking questions. Clearly they knew it was a mistake. It's not like their company is a well-known place for presidential speeches. Rasputin. The man boned that Serena and then walked off enough cyanide to kill an elephant and a bunch of bullets and only died from drowning. In Soviet Russia you kill cyanide. Caligula. Almost everything that's crazy about him is because he trolled the Senate so hard they dragged his legacy through the mud. The man is one of the only emperors to actually invest in Roman infrastructure with Roman money. Read he taxed the Senate class to rebuild public waterways. He was in a mutually contemptuous relationship as emperor. He knew how much power he had and was paranoid enough to not get killed for wielding it. Historians are still untangling what was just Caligula trolls recontextualized for a smear campaign. Juan Pujol Garcia. A man in World War II who decided to be a counterintelligence agent against the Nazis. Britain and US rejected his offer, so he did it on his own. Made up an alias as a pro-Nazi Spaniard. Made up a ton of fake agents that the Nazis paid him for. Sent Nazis hunting a bunch of bogus convoys and boats for years. And eventually trolled Feni Sirojim so hard he was recruited by the Allied intelligence. George Sarmanazar, a blonde-haired, blue-eyed Frenchman who pretended he a royal from the island of Formosa, now modern-day Taiwan. Came up with his own fake religion, diet, and language, with F-King syntax, that he taught in universities across Europe. This was in the 17th century. During basic training in 1914, a British soldier was a terrible shot on the rifle range. Could not hit a barn door. Eventually his instructor snapped and shouted, "For God's sake, go behind that shed over there and shoot yourself." The soldier at once took his rifle and walked off behind the shed. About 30 seconds later the rest of the men hear a single rifle shot. "Bloody hell. He's done it," said the instructor. Another 30 seconds pass, then the soldier reappears back from behind the shed and tells the instructor, "I tried to shoot myself, Sarge, but I only went and missed again." Double quote. Donald Trump has 100s of millions of people's brains in a pretzel. The fact that I'll most likely get downvoted for this is further proof. The man got roasted at a presidential dinner, for good reason, and then decided he was going to run for president to prove everyone wrong. And he actually won. That's some next level trolling. So probably not the biggest, but this one member of the Hellfire Club hid a monkey with a mask in a box, and after they finished the demon summoning part of the meeting, opened it. One member fell to his knees and begged forgiveness, and the monkey ended up escaping and causing havoc in a nearby town. Ike.